country desperately poor and grossly unequal like India, the question of growth versus social equity just never goes away. Today, in this very special discussion on World Economic Forum, that's what we are going to debate with a very special panel here. Adi Godrej, Chairman of the Godrej Group and President CII, Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, CMD of Biocon, and Ranjit Shahani, Vice Chairman and MD of Novartis Group. Thank you very much for being here. I think I'm going to start with this very basic question. Mr. Godrej, where are we? Are we India shining or are we India in the dark? 17% of the world's population, fourth largest growing economy. Yet if you look at the statistics, 35% of the world's poor, 40% of the world's illiterate, and 42% of the world's malnutritioned children.
No, clearly social development has been poor, but there has been a lot of social development. Unfortunately, we had about 40 years of socialism in this country, which kept our growth low and social equity also very low. I don't believe in growth versus social equity. I think it should be growth together with social equity. I think growth helps social equity and social equity helps growth. So I think we must clearly have policies that move both these forward strongly, hand in glove, and that can be done. It is very important that social equity is not created by huge doles given out, because that doesn't help the poor for a long period of time. Social equity should be created through improved social infrastructure. In fact, I think we should pay more attention to social infrastructure than to physical infrastructure. Both are very important, but social infrastructure needs tremendous attention. Most importantly, education and skill building and training. If we can do that, I believe there is no unemployment in India, only unemployability.
Right.
We are very short of skilled people, both at blue collar level, white collar level, managerial level. We need to train our people, we need to skill our people. Of course, we need to pay a lot of attention to education, both primary, secondary and tertiary. If we can do all this together, then we'll get to this. We were talking in this earlier session today about double-digit growth. We can get to double-digit growth, but we must see to it that social equity and growth go hand in hand.
These are not contradictory goals that the nation has to face, but is growth enough? I know that growth has to be focused on. 15 years of growth, Kiran, do you think that poverty will get eradicated in this country?
You know, I think growth has to be looked at as a very mega development objective for the country. And like Adi said, I think social equity and growth are not mutually exclusive. I mean, they have to be integrated. And I think one will drive the other. Now, I personally believe that, there can be several impetuses for actually delivering on this double-digit growth. We can't but do without double-digit growth if we want to really address both, okay? And I think here, technology can play a very important role in bringing about, equity across the board. And I believe that women can also be a very important part of delivering both social equity and growth. We have excluded women from the economic mainstream for far too long. And I really believe that we are also giving them handouts which they don't need. I think we need women to be a very integral part of our socio-economic fabric. And that's where I think our policies, reforms have to be in sync with what we are trying to do to build this nation to be in that very strong economic position. Now, I really believe that what we are not doing is really addressing comprehensive and integrated reforms. We are doing it in a very sporadic manner. We are doing it in a very disjointed manner. We are doing it by way of subsidies. We are doing it by way of political kind of considerations, but we are not doing it in a cohesive way. That to me is really the challenge that we face. And I think we can do it. I totally agree with Adi that there are many, many solutions, but we need a balanced solution. Now here we need all stakeholders involved when you come up with policies, and more importantly, when you implement those policies. We are actually doing this in isolation in most cases.
All right. Okay, so let's then focus on just the welfare economy as well. This current government has been leaning towards a welfare economy, and that's fairly evident in the number of policies that it's been running. For example, Narega. Do you think the government, when we're talking about growth and equity, the government has a very big role and should continue to play that role when it comes to just bringing about social equity?
Well, the fact remains India is two markets in one country. In some respects, we lived 18th century and 21st century back to back together, and the government really has a challenge in front of it. There are very large proportion of our population where education and healthcare are really out of reach. And the question really is, are these people the wards of the corporate or are they the wards of the government? The answer is not either, but multiple stakeholders together. And while innovation is central to all this, and I don't mean innovation in the sense of science, I mean in terms of innovative policies. I think the government, they started on the path of liberalization, but there was a start and stop approach. And I think clearly the time has come that we need to jumpstart. And the discussion in the earlier panel was rebooting. And I'm very clear that if we go at this slow rate, we cannot pull up the swaths of people which need to come up at the speed which needs to come up. And I think education, health, and as Kiran rightly said, women, they have to be right in the forefront, because as our first Prime Minister Pandit Nehru said, if you educate a woman in the village, the family wakes up, the village wakes up, the country wakes up. And I think we have a long way to go there. There are states, it's actually very different in each state. There are states where they are leading ahead, and where the states we still live 18th century back. So there is a lot to be done there, but multiple stakeholders must come together, and the corporate, the government, the NGOs, the civil society,
has to come
they all have a role to play each, and it's not one or the other.
All right. So explain to me, Mr. Godrej, why is it that we have seen 8% growth also for a short period, and we have been called as one of the fastest growing economies, but if you look at the last 2 decades, income inequality has actually doubled in the country. So there's something absolutely flawed either in our employment structure or in our education structure.
I think we shouldn't be too worried about income inequality. What is very important is that poverty alleviation must be very strong. If we have a few very rich, I don't think that's the comparison we should make. I think what we should make, and remember, if you have a free enterprise system, one of the things you have to live with is there is going to be income inequality. But what is very important is that the very poor get raised dramatically fast. And we can do it, but to my mind, doling out is not the solution.
So Narega is not a solution?
Narega is not doling out. If Narega is well handled, it's not fully well handled, but Narega I think has had good things. You provide work,
right,
which is not necessarily doling out. If that work is, say, building infrastructure, that work is adding value to the rural areas, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
If that work is just payment made and no work done, I don't think it's a good policy.
So we don't need a UID and a cash transfer policy?
Of
You
course.
do.
I think
right
that
now,
would be excellent. For example, why do we subsidize diesel in this country? 80% of diesel is used for transport. It doesn't help the poor. Some do. Some poor farmers might be using. Even the poor farmers don't have diesel pump sets. So it's a wasteful way of doing it. If you want to put money in the hands of the very poor for desperate needs that they may have, it should be done through UID, and that could work very well. And I'm sure once it is brought in, that would help tremendously. But the most important thing to my mind is education that will leave poor people in a situation when they can raise themselves up. And this education should go into skilling and training for 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. I think that's also education. Skilling and training, to my mind, is very important in India. We are very short of skilled, trained, even blue-collar workers in this country, which affects manufacturing growth, construction growth, etc. At the same time, many of them are unemployed. So that would create a self-starting momentum that would bring down poverty very considerably in this country. And if poverty comes down, growth will rise. And Kiran very correctly mentioned about involving women. There is research which shows if we bring in reforms like the GST, it will add 2 percentage points to our growth rate. Right. If you involve women in the economy only to a level of 50% of what happens in Western countries, it adds 1 percentage point to our economy. If transparency improves in the country, again, if corruption is reduced by 50%, it adds another percentage point to our growth rate. We could be growing at double digits, which would help alleviate poverty but faster both ways, by creating jobs and employment, and enable the government to do the right things, the sensible things to alleviate poverty.
I'm going to come down to that very important question, right kind of education, right kind of skilling. But look at the way our manufacturing sector is growing, and compare it to China, we are way behind. You will have a whole army of youth who are probably educated, maybe right skilled, and no jobs.
Well, this is the challenge, because we leapfrog from an agro-economy to a service economy, and clearly any country...
And manufacturing is being missed out though in the middle.
So the growth cannot come unless you have manufacturing, and I think manufacturing can be helped and jump-started again with more liberal policies. For example, the labor policy, I think that is one big challenge which manufacturing has faced. The other thing, of course, is some of the people who need to be skilled. This is where education comes, vocational education. I think manufacturing needs a lot of help in that area. And Adi is here, and he knows, he's on the manufacturing side in a big way, and he realizes where the big gaps are. So this is, at economy is only 16 or 18% is manufacturing, and that's far too low for a country which is on this growth path.
Do you have any hopes for India's manufacturing sector looking at the current state of affairs? The labor laws haven't changed for the longest time, and that remains a big crux. Nobody's incentivized to actually get into the sector, and investment is dropping.
I believe that India has a huge opportunity in the manufacturing sector. Obviously, we are doing too much, skewed in favor of services. Like Ranjit said, we moved from an agrarian economy to a services economy, and that's why when you start from that kind of low base, you are going to see high growth. So that's what we've seen in the past. But we overlooked the manufacturing sector. Where are the reforms in the manufacturing sector? For over a decade, we've seen nothing for the manufacturing sector. We continue to, challenge the manufacturing sector with high interest loans, with very suboptimal infrastructure, with no labor reforms, with no reforms at all for the manufacturing sector to take advantage of. And that's what the problem is. Today, manufacturing is going to be a very, very important part of India's economic agenda. But in order to do that, we need a sleuth of reforms. Plus, I think women again have to play a very important role in that manufacturing sector. One of the interesting statistics is that, let's look at the agrarian economy that we are today. Okay, 75% of farmers do not want their children to be in the agricultural sector. They want to move on to the manufacturing and industry. Okay, now that's a good sign. That's going to come from skilling and education. And here women are the ones who are driving it. Women don't want to see their children tilling the soil. They want them to move on and get jobs. So this job creation, where we are actually going to be seeing almost 500 million people coming into the job market, and if we don't create the right kind of jobs, we're not going to have the right kind of economic growth. So I think we need to look at how are we going to build India as a smart economy. That to me is a very important opportunity for India, and there I think technology plays a very important role. Technology plays a very important role in addressing transparency, accountability, corruption and efficiency. Okay, and on the other hand, I think we have to leverage the woman power that we have in this country. We are not doing enough. I think women are playing in their own silent way an amazing role in society. Look what it's done to Bangladesh. Bangladesh, where women have been empowered okay, and who have been financially supported through the microcredit system, today actually has some of the most amazing statistics. You look at some of their metrics, their growth rate is down to 2.3. Their female infanticide level is almost come to 0. Now these are very important indicators of how women empowerment and emancipation in terms of economic emancipation has done wonders for that
For
country.
a country which is poorer than us and probably
Absolutely.
much lower in all matrices of growth than us.
Absolutely. Even in our own country, we are seeing women play a very important role in rural and the sort of the social economic sectors. You look at healthcare, what we call as ASHA workers or the health workers. It's a huge women's brigade. Okay, we are seeing self-help groups, like
Cottage
Elabats,
industry.
Seva and many others. A lot of women's cooperatives are also getting into cottage scale manufacturing. Entrepreneurship is going to be extremely important. So when we talk about innovative policies, that's what is
Women have to be included. But why? Why is it that, with this kind of literacy or educated nation, a thinking nation, our women just rank so low in the policymakers' view, or even if they do rank high on the paper, actual social conditions are completely different.
I think we should remember that past social mores were such that it was a very patriarchal society. Women were not permitted to rise. Fortunately, I think things are changing. If you look at the young in India, whether rural or urban, this bias against women is dying out. So I'm very confident that more and more women will come into the mainstream. And of course, if you look at, we've had many women chief ministers, we've had a woman prime minister. So from that point of view, at the top, it's not been too bad a record. But overall, I think we need to do more. But coming to manufacturing, if I might just spend a minute, I expect that the new manufacturing policy that has been announced to take the salience of manufacturing in our GDP from the present 16% to 25% in 10 years.
And 100 million jobs.
Can play a very, very strong role if it's rolled out. The only thing missing currently is labor reforms. To my mind, the labor reforms are very necessary, because for every job we artificially seek to protect with our present labor laws, we are losing 10 jobs because of lack of investment, because people don't want to employ, because they're not sure whether in an off-season period or a downturn they'll be able to continue to employ. So we need to get a very practical labor law on, which to my mind will create much more employment than the present position.
What are your hopes, Ranjit, on the labour laws changing and the actual reforms which manufacturing requires to kickstart? I would say it's fairly right now stagnant in the economy.
Well, I'm a perennial optimist, and I think looking at the construct and the fact that the government seems to getting the act together, and as we saw from the latest rally as well, I feel some of this will happen. I know that the opposition will oppose, because that is their job. When they are in power, they want to bring the similar reforms. But I hope that this session of the Parliament sees many of the acts which are lying on the floor of the Parliament actually come to the top. But I just want to also give an example of women, since we've talked about that. We were in interior villages of Maharashtra on some project, and this was right in the interior, and there was only one question asked after the project was done of the women of the house. What is the dream for their family? Not for their boy or their husband, or what is the dream for the family? And their answer was education for my daughter.
Really?
And this, I think, is an awakening, which is truly a wake-up call. And I think if in terms of infrastructure support and policies, if we can do this, India will surely wake up.
So you're saying women, education and manufacturing, three solutions that we are seeing. But I still would like to understand, Kiran, that what about direct intervention? In absolute terms, the ratio of poverty has gone down, but in ratio terms, poverty numbers have gone down, but absolute numbers are still huge. What about direct intervention? For how long do you think the state, the corporates and individuals really need to intervene and directly help the people below the poverty line?
See, what we have to try and do is alleviate poverty in a very sustainable way. This, handouts is not going to really
But
solve
for
the
the
problem.
moment, right now, when you're living in abject
you need a
poverty-
mix of things. You need a mix of things. First and foremost, you need right to education, right to healthcare, but it has to be about quality healthcare and quality education.
And right to food. even
And
that.
of course right to food. So I think when you look at all this, I think we are using the UID as one of those powerful technology interventions to look at some of these issues. Now on the other hand, you also have to build skills, because otherwise how do they gainfully employ
You cannot
themselves?
permanently pull them out.
Yeah. So I think you need to look at all these aspects, but I think what is most important is, do you have a broad roadmap of how you're going to go into this direction? So you need that very well mapped out, frame of reference for us in terms of our economic agenda. Can we have a frame of reference that says that the Indian economy should be sort of almost equally distributed between services, manufacturing and agriculture? And how long will that take? Okay, and what is it going to take us to get there? Okay, now there again, you have to map out what is the job creation in each one of these sectors, what is the income level in each one of these sectors, how do you cross subsidize these sectors, how do you make sure that you bring in equity amongst these sectors. Now all this can actually happen if you think it through and have a long-term vision. Unfortunately, we are always in a reaction mode. We are not thinking and forecasting and planning far enough. We're dealing
We're
with present
planning, we're
crisis.
just not implementing.
Yeah, no, even the plans are very short-lived. They're very short-term plans. I think we need to have a very long-term planning exercise where we actually set ourselves, what is that vision 2050 that we want to set ourselves, and then work along the milestones that we have to get to that.
Manisha, if we don't have growth, we won't have the resources
Absolutely.
for
I
implementing social equity. We must remember that. First
Where
of
will
all,
the money
we need
come
the
from?
resources. And then those resources should be most efficiently spent. Not emotionally, but in a practical, logical manner. And it's no use solving an immediate problem for a short period of time, spending a lot of money on that, and then not solving the long-term problem. It's like in philanthropy. Just doling out money in philanthropy is
Not
not
going to be
half
the
as
answer.
good as creating facilities for education, healthcare, or whichever other way you help the long term.
But we broke away from the so-called Hindu growth rate of 2.5% because policies were liberalized. But finally, apart from the policies, it's really execution. Because as far as the private sector is concerned, if the policy is right, they're ready to execute. And my line always is execute, or be executed. Because,
All
we're
right.
just not
I think
there.
that's a strong note at which we can end this discussion, and very interesting insights. Again, these are not contradictory objectives, but some very aligned ones in an economy like ours. Ranjit, Kiran and Mr. Godrej, thank you very much for joining me on this panel today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.